For years, prosecutor Robert Kane believed he could crush any young defendant with a glance and a stack of half-truths. He saw Noah Reyes, a trembling teenager in a secondhand suit, and assumed easy victory. He mistook vulnerability for weakness. But when they picked Noah, they didn't know who they were messing with. They didn't know Noah Reyes wasn't just a scared boy. He was a brilliant, self-taught fighter for his own freedom and for the integrity of the justice system itself. What came next wasn't just justice. It was a reckoning. A system built on assumptions was about to be stripped bare, exposed one flaw at a time. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you're watching from and make sure to subscribe, because the story you're about to hear isn't just about one man. It's about all of us. Sunlight filtered through the dusty courtroom windows, casting long, solemn beams across the battered wooden benches. Silence thickened the air, heavy with judgment and expectation. In that quiet, Noah Reyes stood alone. But not for long. The courtroom hummed with a low, judgmental murmur, like a restless sea before the storm. At the center of it all stood Noah Reyes, barely 18, swallowed by an ill-fitting second-hand suit, clutching a worn briefcase with trembling hands. Across the room, Judge Marian Holloway, a woman known for her sharp tongue and sharper gavel, peered at him over the rims of her silver-framed glasses, her mouth twisting into something dangerously close to a smirk. "Noah Reyes," she began, her voice slicing through the air with icy precision, "you've chosen to represent yourself against charges of grand theft auto and resisting arrest. Are you absolutely certain you wish to proceed without a real attorney? This isn't a playground, young man." A ripple of laughter cracked through the gallery. Not cruel, but dismissive, the way people chuckle when they believe the outcome is already written. Even the seasoned prosecutor, Robert Kane, adjusted his expensive tie and exchanged a knowing glance with the jury, as if saying, "This will be over before lunch." Noah's hands trembled slightly as he rose, but when he spoke, his voice carried a surprising weight. "Your Honor," he said steadily, "I am fully aware of the seriousness of the charges. I have reviewed the evidence extensively, and I am prepared to defend myself." The judge arched an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Confidence is admirable, Mr. Reyes. Competence, however, is what matters in this courtroom." Somewhere in the back, someone snickered again. But Noah didn't flinch. He looked not just at the judge, but at every juror, every spectator, letting his gaze linger, not with the arrogance of youth, but with the quiet defiance of someone who knew he had already been sentenced in their minds before he had even spoken a word. How often do we dismiss the young simply because they look unready? How many chances have we thrown away because of what we think we see? The room settled into a stiff, expectant silence. The match had been lit, and though no one knew it yet, the boy they had mocked was about to set their entire house of certainty on fire. Robert Kane, the prosecutor, rose to his feet with the smoothness of a man who had won more cases than he could remember. "Your Honor," he announced confidently, "the state is prepared to present overwhelming evidence against Mr. Reyes, including eyewitness accounts and security footage. We anticipate a swift resolution." Noah listened, his face calm but his heart pounding so loudly he could barely hear the words. He clutched his notes tighter, steadying himself with every shallow breath. He had known this would happen. He had studied every piece of evidence, memorized every inconsistency, like lifelines sewn into a threadbare raft. The first witness, Officer Brendan Cole, took the stand, a broad-shouldered man with a permanent scowl etched into his face. "I saw the defendant trying to hotwire a black sedan," Cole testified, his voice firm. "He fled when I ordered him to stop." The gallery nodded in unconscious agreement. It sounded simple enough, clear-cut. Noah rose, his suit jacket slipping slightly off his narrow shoulders, and approached the officer with a quiet, focused intensity. "Officer Cole," Noah began, voice steady, "you stated that you observed me attempting to hotwire the car. From how far away did you make this observation?" Cole hesitated, then said, About 20 feet. Noah paused, letting the answer float in the heavy air. And was it dark at the time? Yes, Cole admitted. The courtroom leaned in, sensing a shift. Noah reached into his briefcase and produced a glossy photograph, the interior of the car in question. "Officer, could you point out where the ignition wires are located?" Noah asked, offering the photo. Cole frowned, studying it. "Inside the dashboard." Noah turned slowly to face the jury. His voice dropped into something deeper, more deliberate. "So, from 20 feet away, at night, through a closed window, you could clearly see inside the dashboard?" A murmur spread through the room like wildfire. At that moment, the first real crack appeared in the state's wall of certainty. And for just a heartbeat, even Judge Holloway stopped doodling on her notepad and looked up. How often do we accept a version of truth just because it's convenient? How many lies have we swallowed simply because they were served to us by someone in uniform? Noah stepped back, his face unreadable. The battle had truly begun. The prosecution, sensing the tide shifting, quickly called their next witness. Evelyn Hartman, the stern-faced owner of the allegedly stolen car. She took the stand with the cold precision of someone convinced she was on the side of righteousness. Her voice was tight with frustration as she recounted the events. "I parked my car outside my home that night," Evelyn said, glaring at Noah. "The next morning, it was gone. Later that day, the police found the defendant inside it." There it was again, the assumption layered so thick it became truth. Noah stood, adjusted his jacket, and approached with careful, deliberate steps. "Mrs. Hartman," he began softly, "when you discovered your car missing, did you personally witness anyone taking it?" She shook her head, almost irritated. "No, I was asleep." Noah nodded thoughtfully. "And when the car was recovered, was there any damage? Broken windows? Forced locks?" Mrs. Hartman frowned, as if the question annoyed her. "No, the car was intact." The silence that followed was heavy. Noah let it breathe, allowed the jurors to sit with it before he spoke again. "So no signs of forced entry," he said, turning slowly to face the jury, "meaning whoever entered the car didn't need to break in." He let the words hang there like a riddle waiting to be solved. "Mrs. Hartman," Noah continued, voice steady but sharp, "who else has access to your car keys? Speak to you of anything before you, after me, and my husband," she replied, glancing briefly at the prosecutor, as if for reassurance. Noah paused again, giving the jury time to digest this small but powerful revelation. If only 2 people had the keys, and neither reported them stolen, what really happened that night? Have you realized that the doors we lock so tightly might already be opened from within? The courtroom felt different now. A current of doubt had begun to weave through the room, threading its way into the once settled minds of the jurors. And Noah Reyes was far from finished. When Robert Kane called his next witness, Detective Alan Brewer, a ripple of expectation moved through the gallery. Brewer was no amateur. He was a veteran with decades of polished courtroom testimony behind him. If anyone could seal Noah's fate, it was him. Brewer walked to the stand with the casual confidence of a man carrying ironclad evidence. "We have security footage," Brewer said firmly, showing the defendant entering the vehicle on the night in question. "The footage clearly matches Mr. Reyes' description." The words "clearly matches" echoed off the wood-paneled walls like a verdict already rendered. For a moment, doubt flickered across Noah's mind, but he pressed it down. He knew what that footage really showed, or rather, what it didn't. When it was Noah's turn, he approached slowly, his footsteps echoing with a steady, unhurried rhythm. "Detective Brewer," he began, voice low but precise, "you testified that the footage matches my description. Tell me, does the video show the person's face clearly?" Brewer hesitated, a small but significant crack. "No," he admitted. "The footage is grainy. The figure's face is not distinctly visible." Noah let that truth settle in the room like a cold draft creeping under a door. And what specifically identifies the figure as me? Noah asked, tilting his head. The build, Brewer said stiffly, and the clothing. Noah turned, locking eyes with the jury. Not the face, only assumptions based on general appearance. He held up a printed still from the video, a blurry figure in an oversized hoodie, impossible to identify. If the face is invisible, how can anyone be certain? He asked, voice sharpened with quiet fire. And more importantly, how many young men fit that same vague silhouette on any given night? How often do we believe what we want to see, even when the truth blurs right before our eyes? The courtroom shifted again, the once solid foundation of the prosecution's case beginning to buckle under the weight of doubt. Noah stepped back, the still photo trembling slightly in his hand, not from fear, but from the rising electricity of knowing he was no longer just surviving. He was winning. The battle was far from over. Judge Holloway, who had been silent through Noah's dismantling of the prosecution's case, now leaned forward, steepling her fingers. Mr. Reyes, she said, her tone cutting through the thick air, even if the Grand Theft Auto charge collapses, you are still charged with resisting arrest. You fled from an officer. How do you explain that? A low murmur rumbled through the spectators. The judge had found the last thread still tying Noah to a guilty verdict. Noah inhaled deeply. He had known this moment would come. He straightened his notes, his hands steady now, and spoke with the gravity of someone whose freedom dangled by a thread. Your Honor, Noah said, voice rich with restrained urgency. I request permission to call a new witness. Alex Hartman. Kane shot to his feet immediately, protesting loudly. Your Honor, the defense is introducing witnesses without notice. This is irregular. Judge Holloway silenced him with a curt gesture. Irregular is not illegal, she said coolly. Proceed, Mr. Reyes. The doors creaked as Alex Hartman entered, a lanky teenager shifting nervously under the weight of a dozen stairs. He looked guilty of something, but not the crime Noah was accused of. Alex, Noah said gently, on the night in question, did you borrow your uncle's car? Alex nodded, voice barely a whisper. Yeah, I borrowed it, for a date. And when you finished, Noah pressed, what did you do with the car? I parked it by my house, Alex said, fidgeting, but when I came back it was gone. Gone. Just like that, without locks broken, without an engine hot-wired. The truth slid into the open, undeniable and raw. In a system built on assumptions ever truly deliver justice? Noah stepped closer to the jury, his voice lowering into a near whisper. The car was never stolen. It was left unattended and vulnerable. The courtroom held its breath. For the first time, the foundation of every charge against Noah trembled visibly. And somewhere deep inside, even the unyielding Judge Holloway seemed to feel the shift. The courtroom buzzed like a living thing as Alex Hartman stepped down, leaving behind a silence more deafening than any outcry. Robert Keene looked rattled, his once polished arguments slipping through his fingers like sand. Yet he pressed on, clinging to the final accusation like a man clutching a lifeboat in a sinking storm. Your Honor, Keene said, voice strained. Regardless of the ownership issue, the defendant still resisted arrest. That fact remains unchanged. All eyes swung back to Noah, the weight of the room pressed against him. But this time, he didn't falter. Your Honor, he said, standing taller now, I would like to testify in my own defense. Judge Holloway studied him for a long, waved moment before nodding. Very well, proceed. Noah took the stand, facing the jury not as a boy lost, but as a man who had found his voice. He described the night in raw, unvarnished detail, the car left open, the keys dangling, the shout from behind. But most importantly, he explained what he saw. A man in plain clothes rushing at him without a badge, without warning. I didn't see an officer, Noah said, his voice steady. I saw a threat. I ran because I thought I was about to be attacked. Wouldn't you have done the same if you thought your life was in danger? He let the question sit, an invitation to every heart in the room. Have you ever been judged, not by what you intended, but by what people assumed of you? The jury leaned forward now, not with skepticism, but with something softer, understanding, perhaps even shame. Noah continued, his voice almost a whisper, yet somehow reaching every corner of the courtroom. I wasn't resisting arrest, I was resisting fear. The final thread of the prosecution's case snapped, silent and irreversible. For the first time, Noah wasn't just defending himself. He was defending everyone who had ever been misunderstood by a system that valued assumptions over truth. The next morning, the courtroom overflowed, not just with spectators, but with a rare buzzing anticipation. Noah Reyes sat at the defense table, his hands clasped tightly, his breath steady. The jury filed in, their faces solemn, carrying the weight of a decision that could either shatter or redeem a life. Judge Holloway's gavel struck once, sharp and final. Has the jury reached a verdict? She asked, her voice echoing against the high ceilings. The foreman, a graying man with thoughtful eyes, stood. We have, Your Honor. He unfolded a slip of paper with slow, deliberate hands. On the charge of grand theft auto, we find the defendant not guilty. A collective gasp fluttered through the room, soft but unmistakable. Noah closed his eyes for a brief second, feeling something heavy begin to lift from his chest. But it wasn't over yet. And on the charge of resisting arrest, the foreman continued, we find the defendant not guilty. The room erupted into a cacophony of emotions. Some cheered, some whispered in disbelief, a few simply stared, stunned into silence. Noah stayed still, absorbing it all, letting the moment stretch across his soul like a sunrise breaking after an endless night. How often do we forget that hope can survive even when everyone else stops believing? Judge Holloway rapped her gavel for order, her stern expression softened into something resembling pride. Master Reyes, she said, standing, you are free to go, and I must say, you have revealed more than just the facts of this case. You have exposed flaws that demand our attention. I sincerely hope you consider a future in law. We need minds like yours. Noah stood, his legs trembling with release rather than fear. He turned toward the doors, the sun spilling through the glass as if welcoming him back to a world he had nearly lost. Outside, Alex Hartman approached, guilt heavy in his voice. I'm sorry, Noah. I didn't mean for this to happen. Noah offered a quiet smile. It's not just about what happened to me. It's about what needs to change. And, as he stepped out into the brilliant morning light, a single thought burned steady in his chest. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Sometimes, the smallest voice in the room holds the greatest truth. Noah Reyes taught us that true strength isn't found in titles, years, or appearances. It is found in courage, in preparation, and in the unwavering belief that the truth matters. When the world sees someone as too young, too small, or too ordinary to make a difference, that's often when the greatest change begins. This story reminds us that justice is not automatic. It must be fought for, with steady hearts and clear minds. It reminds us, too, that even when we are overlooked or underestimated, we can still rise, not by shouting louder, but by standing firmer. Isn't it true that at some point in our lives, we were all underestimated, and yet here we are, stronger because of it? In a world quick to judge, perhaps the greatest wisdom is to look deeper, to listen longer, and to believe that no act of courage, however small, is ever wasted. Because standing up for what is right doesn't just change one verdict, it changes the very ground we all stand on. Outside the courthouse, Noah stood alone for a moment, the sunlight warming his face, the noise of the crowd fading into a distant hum. There were no grand speeches, no roaring applause, only the quiet power of survival, of dignity reclaimed without needing permission or praise. Sometimes, true victory is not in the noise we make, but in the silence we endure, and overcome. In the days and months that followed, Noah's steps grew surer. He chose to walk a harder path, one of rebuilding trust, challenging injustice, and ensuring that the shadows of prejudice could not simply slip back into hiding. Each step he took was not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been unseen, unheard, or unjustly judged. If this story stayed with you, share it. Subscribe to Echoes of Racism so these voices don't fade into silence. In the meantime, I've chosen 2 stories I think will move you just as much. Take care, and we'll see you soon.